long-running process where we could get charges against, of course, people in the great public interest, whether that could include the former president or other individuals. Judge, I did want to get all of that on the record here, and I have to reserve the right to interrupt again if we get anything, but
absolutely,
please, please say anything you wanted to say about this process, as well as to finish the point you were sharing with us.
Yeah, first of all, I'm very glad that this is transparent, that the public has a right to see what is going on, because transparency builds trust. What I was saying, that it appears that there will be an indictment of sorts. And if the indictment includes Donald Trump, I was just saying, I can tell you what's ahead. He is going to continue to violate orders that are from the judge and the magistrate to not talk about things that would intimidate a witness or maybe influence a jury. And so when I was on the bench, I occasionally had to rein in lawyers and rein in litigants when I felt that they were not adhering to the rules that I had set out. And it's just so important that a trial court judge, be it federal or state, has to maintain control of that courtroom. And it's very hard, if I'm right, and Donald Trump, for example, is indicted, and he once again starts talking. It's just classic. This term I threw out before was logorrhea, and it is the constant need to talk. Sometimes incoherently. And most recently, he was very incoherent when he was talking in Iowa at the state fair. He wasn't making sense at all. So it's of no moment to a trial court judge if the person in front of her has this condition, because if you can't control what you say, you can control where you say it. And that's where it comes to his lawyers. They have got to be able to rein him in. They likely will not. So I really predict that if he continues, and if, say, he has this condition, he's going to end up not only just in contempt, but he's going to be in jail.
Well, wow, that's quite a statement, and you've run quite a bunch of cases. Judge, stay with us. I want to bring Nicole Walz back in on the visual, the transparency of it, the openness of it. You held a job where you had to address the public on behalf of the government. There was a tradition to that. For viewers watching, and some of our viewers, I'm sure, are familiar with some of the other arraignments we've covered. Donald Trump has now been arrested in government custody 3 times this year alone. But for the other ones, you know, there's a funny thing, Nicole, about custom, which is sometimes we give it too much weight. Totally. The federal custom is just that. Supreme Court, federal courts, it's very close. It's not very transparent. Right. So we are accustomed to waiting on court sketches. What we're seeing tonight, if somebody says, oh, this is different, or here we're watching the footage of, I believe, let's see live who's walking in. This is more transparent, Nicole. And do we have Katie as well? Does Katie want to weigh in on this?
What are they holding?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Katie, go ahead. We were just watching them walk through from the clerk, I believe.
The papers.
Yeah, so the return from the grand jury, the indictment is being walked over to Judge McBurney. He has just announced it to members of the media. Once that happens, the defendants will be announced. The charges will be announced. However, the indictment itself will not be read aloud. What do I mean by that? You won't actually have, if it's a speaking indictment, from what we've heard, would usually be anticipated in this instance, you won't actually hear the indictment in its entirety being read. However, we'll be made aware of who the defendant, or defendants plural, will be. You're watching right now on your screen. That is a clerk who is receiving that. It has to be stamped and filed into the clerk and the clerk of court system, Ari, and then it'll be walked over to Judge McBurney into his courtroom, at which point in time it will be read aloud by Judge McBurney.
It's extraordinary. Stay with us, Katie. Nicole and I were just discussing, Katie, Nicole, that this is what we didn't see in the other arraignments. This is the public process. This actually looks, if you've only been watching federal indictments, unusual, but this is designed to show the public and the rights of any defendants exactly what is happening.
And if you look in recent history, I mean, the 2 Democratic lawmakers who were expelled in the state of Tennessee, I think the cameras chronicling that process had something to do with their reinstatement and their being voted back in. I think when we can see things with our own eyes, it is the only bulwark against the tsunami of disinformation being strategically deployed by the right. I mean, what Trump has to his benefit is an operationalized disinformation mechanism that's unrivaled in this country by any other sort of agency or aim other than Trumpism. And so I think when he said in 2017, the first year of his presidency, don't believe what you see, don't believe what you hear, only believe what I tell you, he was afraid of days like today.
And I think what we're watching, again, we're taking as we get it, was that footage, because we have more than one camera. This is a mounted pool camera inside the courtroom. It swivels at times. Well, the other footage was in what we understand to be the hallway and the adjacent clerk's office. Nicole, I think we're seeing the walking of those documents, which I saw signed, Andrew, I believe, by a clerk, will be walked into this room, Andrew.
Yep, absolutely. To the point of transparency, one thing to note is that in Georgia State Court, it's common to have cameras in the courtroom. And that is one of the reasons it will keep your eye on the fact that when Donald Trump is indicted, as we all expect to see momentarily, that he is going to be moving to have the case taken federal, as he did try to in Manhattan.
New York, yeah.
If that happens and he succeeds, the federal rules will govern the trial. So one of the consequences of that issue, whether it's state or federal, is cameras in the courtroom, because if it's, that's one where federally it would take the Chief Justice of the United States to permit to have cameras in the courtroom.
And Nicole, again, as we're watching this, and then we have the feed now of the back of the courtroom, we expect the process that we saw in the hallway to continue to commence. So we're really in it right now. But Nicole, when you think about the lies that fed the insurrection and the accountability, we have a civil process. Fox News had to pay out a lot and is still making changes for that. We have a criminal process if people have been found under evidence to have acted.
Hello, everybody. I just quickly need to say something here. I have to interrupt every once in a while, or they'll shut me down. Anyway, it's very exciting. Here are, oh my gosh, look at that thick pile of papers. Oh, that is big trouble for Trump. Oh, that's big trouble. Huge big trouble. Massive big trouble. Oh, good trouble. Good trouble. Oh, it's going to the judge. Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Roberta. Thank you. I appreciate it. All right. Oh, judges got it. Let's listen in.
And pick up any, currently, just so viewers again understand, we didn't have audio. We believe they've turned it on. Let's listen in.
Madam? Agree. One second. Okay, just making sure.
Mr. Royals, everything went as it should have in front of the grand jury?
Yes, sir.
All right. Ms. Alexander, you're prepared to take this? I guess I'm delivering it to the clerk. You'll maintain custody of it from here?
Yes, sir.
All right. For you, do you take the certification or does it go with Madam Clerk? All right. Thank you all. Yes, you too. All right, you guys make way.
Yes, Enchanted Zennial, he does have a kind voice. I agree with that. I agree.
All right. Thanks, Sheriff. Good luck the rest of the evening. Appreciate it. You bet. That's it? Was it all you hoped it would be?
Yes.
Can you tell us what it says?
I did get a good look.
So you all need to leave. I mean that politely and nicely. You've had a long day, but these folks can't go until you all go. I know we had talked about leaving the equipment here. Don't leave the equipment here because you're not going to want to be here tomorrow. You're welcome to be here if you don't have a Rule 22 for what's going on tomorrow. It's just good old trial stuff.
Yes, I like this judge.
Did you find anything good?
It could take up to an hour for the clerk to upload the charging documents. So it's going to take some time until it appears on the.
Do you mind taking? They can come and collect it.
Yeah, it's going to take time for the clerk to upload the documents onto the website. So then, absolutely, they will. It'll be all over the news. They'll be going through it, bit by bit by bit by bit by bit. Michelle says only 10 indictments. Well, that would generally be. My understanding is that would be 10 people, because the charges are. There's an indictment that can contain any number of charges. Fingers crossed. All right. Oh, this is good. This is good. All right. Let's see.
The judge then has the option
Rachel's
with what he is
here.
going to do with the indictment that has been handed up to him. In this case,
Beyonce's playing down the
he
street,
read it silently to
literally.
himself. He seems to have flipped through it. All we could tell was that it was printed on letter-sized white paper and seemed to be about that thick and had a few different striations to it in terms of the way it was divided with binder clips. But he did not provide any information about what the charges are, about who the defendants are, or indeed
This
about
evening,
the content
Rachel
of the indictment.
is interviewing
Now, what is going to happen from here on out?
Hillary Clinton.
We know the
I kid you
basics
not.
under Georgia state law, but we don't know exactly how it will play out this evening.
And yes, she is wearing orange.
Again, this is live. This is the clerk you see holding those what we believe are the indictments that I just described in her left hand here. It's very unusual that this is happening after 9 p.m. This courthouse usually closes for regular business at 5 p.m. The grand jury that was considering this matter today is one that meets on Mondays
is
and
not official,
Tuesdays.
not
That
yet.
raised the prospect that this grand jury proceeding might continue through till tomorrow. But they have apparently pushed through and asked the grand jury to take their vote, which has resulted in the delivery of those, what we believe are indictments, to the judge. They were then effectively certified by the judge. I think that's the right way to describe it, and then given back to the clerk. So we'll be keeping our eyes on what's happening inside the courthouse. The reason I say we don't know exactly how this is going to play out is because we know that under Georgia state law, there's no question but that this indictment or these indictments will be unsealed. There won't, we expect, be a long delay between the process that we just saw and we, the public, being allowed to see that document. Now, I can't tell you exactly how long it's going to be. I also can't tell you if we're going to be getting it from the docket, meaning that we'll have online access to it as an official court document, or whether we'll be receiving it in the form of a press release from the Fulton County District Attorney's Office. We have expected over the course of today, and again, expectations are never promises, but we have expected over the course of the day that if indeed an indictment was handed up, we would see something with Judge McBurney in the courtroom. We didn't know how much he would describe from that document. We expected sooner rather than later to get access to the text of that document. And we expected a news conference, effectively a press conference from the district attorney, from Fani Willis herself. You'll be with us tonight as we are all watching live to see if those things happen. Joining me now from outside the courthouse is our own Katie Fang, MSNBC legal contributor, host of the Katie Fang Show. She's also a former Florida state prosecutor. She's got extensive felony trial experience in state courts. Katie, can you first of all tell me if I just said anything wrong, and if you could add anything to our understanding in terms of what we've just witnessed?
Yeah, so to give you a real-time update, Rachel, right now, that unsealed indictment that was delivered to Judge McBurney has now been delivered to the clerk's office. At that point in time, copies are going to be provided. We're not sure exactly when. Obviously, if we get a copy, we'll provide it to you guys immediately. But there was a very important question, Rachel, that I want to bring to our viewers that was asked by Judge McBurney to the clerk as she was providing them, plural, the 10 indictments, as she was providing them to Judge McBurney. He asked her, quote, "Have you maintained custody of these documents up until now, thereby obviously indicating that if there was any concern that there had been any tampering, Rachel, with those documents in any way, that could obviously be an issue. But of course, the clerk said no. And we also would note, as people were walking in, people being from the clerk's office, there was actually a gentleman with a phone, and he was actually video recording this as they were walking in, thereby providing even more corroboration that nothing happened from when the jury, four-person, signed off on that on those true bills, and then got it to the clerk's office to be stamped in and then delivered to Judge McBurney.
So there are 10 indictments, is the reporting. We believe that the grand jury's work is done, that 10 is the total number of indictments, and they're not expected to keep working and continue voting on additional charges on any additional defendants?
That's correct. So our reporting from actually a photograph that was taken of the cover page is that it is 10 indictments, and the language is exact. It says that there were 0. So the number 10 was handwritten into a blank line in front of the word indictments. And then in terms of no true bills, meaning there was no votes to vote charges through, it said 0. So to reiterate, Rachel, it said 10 indictments were returned. There were no true bills, meaning the evidence that was put forth by the District Attorney Fonnie Willis in the course of her investigation to the members of the grand jury, that they voted on the charges that were involved in that indictment. Now, let me be clear at this point in time. We do not know the names of the defendant or defendants, and we do not know the nature of the charges. That will come, obviously, when we get our hands on these indictments. But I think it's important that we've noted in the coverage that we've had so far, Rachel, this was an incredibly expedient process. We anticipated it being at least a 2-day process. We all thought that Tuesday was going to be the day when we got those indictments returned. And so the fact that we actually saw it done today could be a measure of the value or the quality of the evidence that was being presented by the DA in this case. When I dealt with grand juries in my career, Rachel, it really hinged on the presentation of the evidence, and ultimately the standard is probable cause. Was there probable cause met? Was it provided in the nature of the evidence to the members of the grand jury? And to just kind of reemphasize this point, it is a numbers issue in the state of Georgia. You have 23 grand jurors. 16 of those grand jurors must be present through the entirety of the presentment of evidence, but it only takes 12 of those 23 grand jurors to vote a charge through.
Katie, as a non-lawyer, let me just make sure that I understand what you mean by the no true bill part of what you just explained. So as you said, this is based on reporting that shows the cover page of what was brought into the judge and then delivered to the court's office. 10 indictments and then 0 in front of no true bill. Is the sort of plain English interpretation of that the prosecutors asked the grand jury to return 10 indictments? They said yes to all 10. There were no indictments that the prosecutors asked for that the grand jury refused.
That is the interpretation of what we saw on that cover page. There was no indication that there were, for example, the presentation of evidence to support 20 indictments and that only 10 were returned. Right now, it is 10 indictments, 0 no true bills, which means that these jurors sat through, and this is very interesting, right? A day, and not even an entire day, right, Rachel? It started this morning. There was a flurry of activity. We had witnesses running the gamut from former Georgia State Senator Jen Jordan and B. Wynn, who was a Georgia State rep who also ran against Brad Raffensperger for Georgia Secretary of State and lost. But then we also had a guy by the last name of Sterling. We had Brad Sterling who showed up today. I could be wrong on the first name, so don't hold me to gospel on that, Rachel. Sorry, Gabriel Sterling. You know, he appeared for hours, Rachel. It was a very long period of time. And then we actually had Jeff Duncan, the former lieutenant governor of Georgia, who was also in there for an extended period of time. So what's noteworthy is one particular witness by the name of George Cheedy, an independent journalist who stumbled upon a meeting of the fake electors who shooed him out of the room and said this is an education meeting, quote unquote. He was teed up. He was literally sitting next to Jeff Duncan waiting to testify. And after a period of time, the DA came up to him or the DA's office came up to him and advised him his testimony wasn't needed. So, reading tea leaves, whatever evidence he was going to provide to the grand jury was deemed to not be necessary. So, again, there's not a requisite or a minimal number of witnesses that are required to present evidence to a grand jury. In this instance, we don't even know the total number at the end of the day that appeared in front of this grand jury. But whatever it was enough per a probable cause standard for 10 indictments to be returned.
And Katie, I'm going to ask the control room now to put up on screen that photo that you've been describing in terms of the front page of this indictment. You see, it says at the top, certification that grand jury indictments returned in open court, July-August term 2023. I hereby certify that on August 14, 2023, after the indictments had been presented to the grand jury and the session had been adjourned for the day, said indictments were returned in open court as required by law. Present for said return were assistant district attorney, and then there's a name, deputy sheriff, and then there's a name, and deputy clerk of the Superior Court. On this date, there were 10 indictments presented to the court. Of those indictments, 0 were no billed by the grand jury. This, the 14th day of August, 2023. Katie, can I just ask you a admittedly super dumb question, which is, does 10 indictments mean 10 defendants?
No, 10 indictments could be multiple co-defendants in each indictment. We don't know. I will give an update in real time to you, Rachel, and our viewers. The clerk's office advising, worst case scenario, it could take 3 hours before the court documents are released. And so at this point in time, we are still going to be on a wait and see stage. However, Rachel, to your question as well, what we are going to see, though, on each of those indictments is, as I relayed earlier, you're going to see an identification of defendants on the left side of the first page of that indictment, a recitation of the charges as they're set forth on the right side of that first page of the indictment. Below each of the defendants, if there are multiple defendants, you will see the charges that apply to each one of them. But also, critically important, the names of the grand jurors will be included in each of those indictments, meaning each of those 23 grand jurors who sat in service, their names will be made publicly available.
Okay,
Those that
the
were not
video's
present
frozen for a
the
second.
vote,
I'll
for
go
the
fix it.
presentment of that
But
evidence
thank
as
you,
well,
Deanna.
their names will
Thank
be crossed
you.
out. It is a remarkably startling, different experience
Callie
in
J.
Georgia State Court.
Let me
We also
refresh
saw the
the.
procession of that's what I'm going to call it, Rachel, the procession.
Okay, I have to refresh this. Hello. Oh my gosh, this is exciting. And it could be multiple co-defendants? Is that what she was saying?
As well, with that live update that you just gave, with the clerk's office advising that it may take 3 hours for them to process these indictments for public release. Is that the only means by which we might see this indictment? Is it possible that the district attorney's office, as opposed to the clerk's office, might themselves release it or a version of it just
Thank you,
as a
Donna.
press document?
Thank you.
Well, it's my understanding that there should be some type of announcement by the DA, Fani Willis, in this case. But I would reasonably anticipate the answer would be no, Rachel, only because I think that it would feed into a false narrative that there's been some type of rush to judgment in some way. And I think that if I were to read tea leaves myself, that I think it's just going to be the wait for the clerk's office to be able to show those documents and make them public for all of us to be able to read.
Is it clear to you at all, Katie, or do you have any sort of just smart supposition as to why this is happening after 9 p.m. As far as I understand, this is a grand jury that has been regularly meeting on Monday and Tuesday. Those are the 2 days of the week on which they meet. Today is Monday. This is Monday night. Why press to get this done over the course of a single day until late in the evening rather than
I'll bet it's
knock off
because
at dinner time and pick back up
security
tomorrow morning?
is really only set up for the rest of the week, and they need to get
Yeah, so I was speaking
arraignments
to a
done.
number of people. As a former trial lawyer sitting through the waiting of a verdict, I equated this experience to verdict watch. When we would have the jury take a case into the jury room and we would be waiting for them to come back, oftentimes when you would reach the end of business hours, a judge would ask the jury, do you want to stay later? In this instance, the staying later part of the grand jury, that was completely within the control of the grand jurors. If they had wanted to go, I am sure they would have been able to go home. I do not think that there would have been any pressure put on them by the DA's office to stay. In fact, quite to the contrary. I also think, Rachel, it would be naive to ignore the political climate that we are currently operating under. There has been a wildly politicized event that has happened with the former president that has been a target of this investigation, where there's been intimidation of witnesses on social media, etc. I think it would be, again, naive to suggest that that did not come into play in some way for the DA's office to make sure that this was done as efficiently but as competently as possible. But again, if the jurors in this case did not want to stay, you would have seen us gone before now. But obviously it's done, and it was done quickly today, and we should have our hands on the copies of those indictments very soon.
MSNBC's Katie Fang outside the courthouse in
It's gonna
Atlanta
be
for us this
epic.
evening. Katie, that was a lot, and it was really important information, and I really, really appreciate you being there for us. I know we'll be back to you over the course of the evening. Thank you, my friend. Joining me here at the table here at MSNBC, Ari Melber, Alex Wagner, Nicole Wallace, Lawrence O'Donnell.
Okay, like I said, I've got to interrupt every once in a while or we'll get shut down. Okay, I did pull some cards quickly. I just want to throw this out there that Trump still thinks everything's the same. Thank you, Debbie. Thank you. Trump still thinks everything's the same. Look, make this a little bit high. Trump still thinks everything's the same, but it's not. And what I've got, the energy on this feels so new. Trump is not expecting, and the people involved, it just feels like it's all minor arcana, but it doesn't feel small. It feels new. This is something he's never dealt with before. I think this is big. This is big. We are, and there have been some questions in the chat. I just wanted to mention that we're waiting. Okay, an indictment is basically, my understanding, with these that pile of papers, those are charging documents, I believe. And all that is saying is that the grand jury found probable cause, not beyond a reasonable doubt, but probable cause to bring charges, and they recommended charges. So now it's being put into the court. It will go in front of a judge again with the people who are who have been indicted. They will be arraigned, and then a trial date will be set. So I just wanted you to know that we're not on a verdict watch. We're not on. It's not like that. And if you're wondering what's the deal, yeah, I just want to throw in. I don't know. We're feeling very, very metal today. Very nighty. Got my pen, and I don't know. Just feel very, very much like a nighty type night. Metal. 10 indictments are 10 crimes. Some crimes will have multiple defendants. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you. All right, so I'll turn the sound back on, and I'm just dancing. I'm just happy. Thank you, Felicity. Thank you. And anybody I may have missed, I'm so sorry. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. All right, let me turn this back on. Okay.
Federal indictment. The fact
Very
that
exciting.
Trump was still sending letters to Brad Raffensperger in September of 2021 tells you that there's more to the story than I think we think of it sort of in and around the federal crimes. We don't actually, even the Coffee County stuff, I think there's so much more that Trump was still trying to get done well into the Biden presidency that presumably is going to be revealed in this indictment once we get it.
Yeah, Laurie, let me just ask you specifically as the lawyer at the table here. The zero no true bills.
Yeah.
The language is so weird. It's like it gets put through this like Old West, like I'm the law martial villain language that doesn't make any sense in sentences. But what does that mean, as Katie was explaining, that the prosecutors asked the grand jury for 10 indictments and the grand jury said yes to all 10?
Yes, it means the prosecutors got everything they wanted. And if they got 9 out of 10 or 8 out of 10, that could still be a lot of progress. If this was a slam dunk, it means they did not lose any of their presentations for indictments. I totally agree with you, Rachel. This was like in law school. There was so often that like you'd spend a long time trying to understand something, and then at the end you'd be like, oh, so both those words are just code words.
Yes.
So you just mean like that, and you're like, okay. And it did remind me of something else. What you said is so vital, and I'm sure some of our viewers felt the same way because we've lived through a couple arraignments now. American history made 3 arraignments of a former president in 1 year. Before that, there were 0 for all presidents, right? So it's not a great record, but what we also kept seeing was court sketches in New York, a brief photo, then take everyone out of the room. This is, we have that expression, this is what democracy looks like. Tonight, this is what open court looks like. And it's called open court for a reason. And this is, I think, one of the good traditions. Some of the stuff I could argue needs to be reformed. That's another night. Some of these traditions, though, are good.
Well, yeah. Some. I am worried about the fact that the jurors' identities are
but
theoretically going to be.
But again, we are supposed to have laws to deal with that. We cannot always live with. It's not like there's some societies where everyone who does everything has to be hidden because it's such a lawless society. Our hope, and we've seen far less insurrection-style protests and crimes since accountability. And Rachel, you've covered that. I mean, as those mobs have shrunk. Right. Yes, you want safety, but the press is in there. The judge is in there. The clerk is in there. The chain of custody, which sounds like, again, one of those terms, is if somebody comes along later and says, well, how do we know that it went from here to there? No, it's all there on more than one camera with more than one independent outlet and a lot of other people. This is what open court looks like. And the defendants have rights. But this was, I thought, a good thing for us to see. And we haven't seen it because in our vaunted federal system, you can't get a camera in the Supreme Court, even when they're deciding on life and death or somebody's rights. You can't get a camera into a criminal trial where someone could end up being executed. That's pretty antiquated. This is open court.
And when it comes to the trial on these charges, if indeed these indictments do produce charges that go to trial, it will be up to the judge as to whether or not there is a camera there for the entire trial. But the strong presumption in Georgia is that there will be.
And this is Trump's nightmare. I mean, Trump wants to be the only arbiter of truth and reality among his very vibrant, healthy base of political supporters. So this is not what Trump wants. He wants to be the only one telling them what is and isn't.
And it's his biggest nightmare in terms of controllability. There is no theoretical Trump control over this case at any stage. Now, if you're someone who believes Donald Trump can win the presidency again, then theoretically he could grab control eventually of the 2 federal prosecutions. But not this. This is going to live in the state of Georgia no matter who is the next president. The governor there does not have pardon power. This is beyond Trump's reach in every way. And it may be, if there's a RICO element of this, the very first indictment that carries anything resembling a mandatory minimum sentence. Now, those we have experts in Georgia who can clarify that for us, because it's not clear to me that the mandatory minimum requires a minimum of confinement. It might be something that is serviceable through probation, but Donald Trump knows all about this. His lawyers have told him RICO in Georgia has a mandatory minimum, and you haven't seen that in any of the rest of your indictments. And this may be, when we really get our hands on it, the most comprehensive description of criminal conduct with the most people, including directed from the Oval Office, that we've seen. It's certainly on a scale with the January 6th indictment.
Well, in terms of how this works in Georgia, the mandatory minimum question and the other parts about the grand jurors' names and all of these things, there is one way we can advance our knowledge of this right this second live, and that is by bringing into this conversation our friend Gwen Keys-Fleming. She is a former district attorney in DeKalb County, Georgia. She knows Fulton County District Attorney Fonnie Willis very well. Ms. Keys-Fleming, we are desperate for your expertise. Thank you for making time to be here with us tonight.
She was on earlier. She's very good.
Thank you for having me.
First, let me give you just a chance if any of us has blown it already. If what we have been
I don't get
describing,
Trump fleeing. I get that he can't.
Is as we've described to our viewers, or if there's anything
He may want to,
that we
but
should
he's
know
going to
in
have
terms
to
of making
face
sense of
judgment.
it
He
for people who've been
cannot
watching
leave.
along with us live at home.
So there's a couple of things that stood out for me. One, as I recall the clip of folks first coming into the courtroom, the documents, as I recall, were handled by the sheriff's office. Usually in Georgia, after the grand jury makes the decision, all of that documentation is whisked away. The DA's office doesn't get to see it. And it is taken to the judge to be read in open court. So to Ari's point, this is what an open courtroom, open trial looks like. And very often, many of us prosecutors don't get to see this because we are back in our offices and waiting for the official documents when they come from the clerk. So again, the sheriff's office delivered the paperwork, the indictments to the judge. The judge then turned them over to the clerk and had them in her custody the whole time. So when people wonder, what is the DA's office doing? I think they're waiting to see themselves. I think certainly the fact that there were the number of no bills. I know there was a discussion about that. What that means basically is the no bills means the case would have been dismissed. And the fact that there are 0 no bills means that all of the charges, all of the defendants that the district attorney and her team put forward, the jury decided that there was sufficient probable cause for all of those charges, all of those defendants to move forward. So we will be waiting to see who is on that list and what the charges are, I guess, throughout the night.
Yeah, let me just ask you a few of those further logistical questions. The clerk's office is advising that it may be 3 hours before they're able to process the indictments for release to the public. Can you explain to us, is it always the clerk's office that releases that? Does the DA's office itself have the possibility, the prospect of releasing that themselves? Should we expect when those documents are released, as Alex Wagner was just talking about, my colleague here, should we in fact expect that the grand jurors' names will be in those documents? Obviously, there's safety concerns with potential doxing of everybody anywhere near any of the Trump-related cases.
So normally in Georgia, all of the grand jurors' names that actually heard evidence are listed on the indictment. Those that were not present that day or not present for that case, usually it's just a strike through their name. So if this proceeds the way it would normally, then yes, all of the grand jurors' names who heard evidence would become public as the case moves forward. Now, that does present a security concern, and so that may be one of the things that either Judge McBurney or the DA asks to not be released to the public, but certainly any defendant that is named is entitled to know who passed judgment, which grand jurors passed judgment on the evidence at this early stage.
Gwen, it's Lawrence O'Donnell. What can you tell us about possible mandatory minimums on RICO charges in Georgia?
So the RICO statute, and we've talked a lot about it, it does have a mandatory 5-year minimum, maximum of 20 years. And I think the maximum fine is up to $25,000, but it depends on if it gets a little technical if you're talking about any financial gain that may have resulted from maintaining this enterprise. But my understanding is that 5 years, it could be served on probation. It does not have to be in confinement, but it is a mandatory minimum that must be imposed by a judge if a petit jury or a trial jury ultimately defines a defendant guilty.
Yeah, I saw a mandatory minimum in a previous RICO case there where the actual confinement was 3 years. It was less than 5, and the rest of it was probation. And so even with this mandatory minimum, that might not necessarily demand confinement for a convicted defendant.
That's correct. That would be up to the judge after, and again, we're getting several steps ahead of ourselves, but if there is a conviction, after hearing all of the evidence, the judge would have the opportunity to decide after hearing from both sides. Obviously, the prosecution is going to make a recommendation for the sentence.
Okay, I do apologize for interrupting her, but like I said, I've got to interrupt every once in a while and we get kicked out. I had questions in the chat. What happens now? We are waiting for that pile of papers with the indictment from the grand jury, that the clerk is going to process that and is going to put it on the website. At that point, they're going to, MSNBC and other people, they're going to print that out as fast as a printer can go and rush copies to the anchors, to everybody on screen. And they're going to go through that in detail. Now, it's going to have to be worked out once that's out there, and the defendants realize that they're defendants. They're going to have to talk to Fonnie Willis's office, or talk to the court about arraignment. So that'll have to be worked out. So the sheriff in Georgia has said, I'm going to treat him exactly like all my other customers. Handcuffs, mug shots, fingerprinting, you name it. So, oh, thank you, everybody. And thank you, Lucky Girl. Oh, there's a kitty. Hello, kitty. Okay. So anyway, I'll turn this back. Bless this woman. She worked for years in that office, did a ton of work for the good of all of
to have gotten
civilization.
through this milestone after
Thank you.
over 2 years. Certainly a sense of accomplishment as you think about the fact that there were 0 dismissals or 0 no bills, but then also a recognition that this is just the pause point. And so they may take that time and get ready for the next step, because certainly as it becomes public who is charged and what those charges are, the DA's office is going to be faced with various motions, maybe similar to what we've seen before, and they're going to get geared up and ready for trial, which will be its own very lengthy process. So I would imagine it's mixed emotions of, okay, this is a short breather. We're proud of what we've accomplished thus far, but the citizens and residents of Fulton County still deserve our best, and we need to gear up and be ready to go starting tomorrow morning or later tonight.
Gwen Keys Fleming, thank you for your invaluable expertise as a former district attorney in neighboring DeKalb County in Georgia. We really need to hear from you tonight. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
And now we're going back to Rachel, who has a special guest.
Thank you, Lawrence. Totally normal segue. Throughout her 2016 campaign for president, Hillary Rodham Clinton warned Americans about this particular choice as the Republican presidential nominee, about what specifically he planned to do to our democracy. He went on to win that election in 2016, of course, and now here we are with a multiply indicted former President Trump and a democracy that frankly has not looked this fragile in well more than a century. All over the country right now, people are wondering what Hillary Rodham Clinton is thinking watching things unfold in Georgia. She is the former Democratic presidential nominee, U.S. Senator from New York and Secretary of State. I should tell you, she has a new essay out in The Atlantic on the well-being of Americans and our democracy. It's called The Weaponization of Loneliness. Madam Secretary, fancy meeting you.
Oh,
here.
I can't believe this.
Yeah, this is not the circumstances in which I expected to be talking to you.
Nor me, Rachel. It's always good to talk to you, but honestly,
I voted
didn't
for her.
think that
Just saying.
it would be under these circumstances. Yet another set of indictments.
This is something, this is becoming like a skill set. Like in the news business, you say like, oh, I've covered Olympics or I've covered a campaign. Now it's, you know, those of us who've covered 4 indictments. I don't know if 4 is it. We don't know if Donald Trump is among those indicted this evening, but all expectations are that he will be. Do you feel satisfaction in that? You warned the country essentially that he was going to try to end democracy, but most of the country didn't believe you.
Well, it's hard to believe. I don't feel any satisfaction. I feel great, you know, just great, profound sadness that we have a former president who has been indicted for so many charges that went right to the heart of whether or not our democracy would survive. And we don't know yet what the charges coming out of Georgia are, but if you stop and think about what the public evidence is, and you've been talking about some of that for the last hour, he set out to defraud the United States of America and the citizens of our nation. He used tactics of harassment, intimidation. He made threats. He and his allies went after state officials, local officials responsible for conducting elections. Now we know they even went into voting machines in order to, determine whether or not those voting machines had somehow been breached when they were the ones actually doing the breaching. So there is a great deal already in the public record. We'll wait to see what the indictments themselves say, because clearly this investigation has been very thorough. But I don't know that anybody should be satisfied. This is a terrible moment for our country to have a former president accused of these terribly important crimes. The only satisfaction may be that the system is working, that all of the efforts by Donald Trump, his allies, and his enablers to try to silence the truth, to try to undermine democracy, have been brought into the light, and justice is being pursued.
One of the things that we've learned by living it in these past few years is that democracy needs the trust of the people.
That's right.
That the system of democracy at its heart is the idea that the people get to decide how we are governed. And if we no longer believe that our will is effectuated through the system, if bad actors tell us falsely that every election is stolen and that the only way an election is trustworthy is if they come out on top of it, then something, it tells you something not just about that person or that moment. It maybe wounds us as a democracy in a way that is hard to repair. What do you think about how we get better after the wounds that have been inflicted on us through this process?
Well, I think, the truth matters. I think having these cases be brought in such professional manners, we'll see how they unfold. Obviously, the trials, if there are trials, are going to be critically important. But the article you mentioned that I published about the weaponization of loneliness really does, in my view, point to the larger cultural concerns, because the lack of trust, the divisiveness, the undermining of faith in ourselves, in each other, respect for our institutions, the rule of law, all of that has been deliberately inculcated within our body politic. There were trends before. I mean, we have seen how people have become more isolated, less community-oriented, less civically minded. Then we see how social media and technology has certainly accelerated a lot of those trends. But the deliberate effort to divide Americans, to lie to Americans about what was going on literally in front of their own eyes, what happened on January 6th, don't believe what you saw, believe what I tell you. Those are all the hallmarks of authoritarian, dictatorial kinds of leaders. And so this attack on the elections was the most important step in a long line of efforts undertaken to undermine our trust and our belief in a functioning democracy, and our commitment to one person, one vote, our commitment to carrying on elections so that people would be enabled to vote, not obstructed from voting. Everything that we have worked on to try to make this a more perfect union has been in the target of the anti-democratic forces, unfortunately led by a demagogue for 4 years in the White House.
When we were watching Gwen Keys-Fleming and Lawrence speaking just a moment ago about the mandatory minimum prison sentence in Georgia for a RICO conviction, Ms. Keys-Fleming noted, maybe we're getting ahead of ourselves a little bit, and I saw you chuckle. Clearly, we are getting ahead of ourselves, and we are thinking about potential sanctions as a result of any of these trials. Let alone, there's these things getting to trial, there's the question of conviction, there's the question of sentencing, but then there is, at the end of that road, the prospect of the prohibitive favorite for the Republican presidential nomination being in prison.
Yeah.
do we as a country have an interest in him not going to prison so that we can still call ourselves a country where leading politicians don't get locked up?
Look, I think that's going to be a much debated issue throughout the country over the next months, because holding him accountable can happen in a number of ways. Prison obviously is one of them, but there are other approaches that can be taken. I think one of the important comments that came out of this long day down in Georgia was by the former lieutenant governor when he said, this is a pivot point. The Republican Party needs to move away. Quit being part of a cult, in effect, is what he meant, where you follow someone who lies to you, undermines legitimate processes of government. Move away from him politically. And, you know, trying to get back to politics in the sense that we used to think we had it, despite all of the human frailties that accompanied it, where, you had parties that would sanction and hold accountable their own members. I was on the impeachment inquiry staff. You cannot make up my life, And so back in 1974, when the impeachment by the House Judiciary Committee was voted on, 4 Republicans voted to impeach President Nixon. Then 3 members of the Senate, leading Republican senators, I think it was Barry Goldwater and Howard Baker and I think Hugh Scott, went to see President Nixon and said, this was a bipartisan vote, you need to resign. Well, that's almost impossible to imagine today because of what's happened to the Republican Party, what they've allowed to happen to themselves. So I hope that we won't have accountability just for Donald Trump, and if there are others named in these indictments along with him for their behavior, but we'll also have accountability for a political party that has just thrown in with all of the lies and the divisiveness and the lack of any conscience about what was being done to the country.
In terms of getting out of this and coming out of this crisis stronger, hopefully, for having confronted, I think, very dark prospects in terms of what this means for democracy. It does feel like the Republican Party as a whole is not ready to make that turn. And I'm thinking really about Ron DeSantis as the guy who's running second to Donald Trump in the Republican primary right now. He is promising that there shouldn't be an independent Department of Justice.
Yeah, well,
under any
he's
Republican
promising
president.
anything to try to get some attention. It's kind of pathetic, isn't it?
He's also removed 2 elected prosecutors in Florida who were chosen, who were elected, who he stepped in and removed them. Georgia Republicans have given themselves the power to remove elected prosecutors as well.
Okay, sorry, but like I said, I have to interrupt, or it will be kicked out. I'm going to pull out the red laser dot, Mr. Dot. We meet again, Mr. Dot. And I'm going to roll back and I'll make myself a little bit bigger, and I'm going to see if I can get Bailey to run around after the dot. And that's what we're going to do while we listen, okay? So, yeah, he wants to play. All right, we'll listen to some more.
That kind of approach to politics, that undermining of democracy, undermining the rule of law. But the shadow of Trump looms so large over all of them. It's really hard to know, once he's off the scene, one way or the other, politically or because of accountability arising out of the various indictments he faces, whether or not backbone will all of a sudden be regrown, whether conscience will once again be part of the Republican Party ethos. We don't know. We hope, because it would be for the good of the country that were to happen. But if it doesn't, the only way we can possibly contest it and defeat it is through the rule of law, as we're seeing with these prosecutors at the federal and now the state level, but also through elections, where we have to defeat those who want to weaponize divisiveness, who want to undermine democratic values and institutions. And that should be frankly, nonpartisan, not just bipartisan. People should all be saying what the so-called never Trumpers, the former Republicans who are, now out beating the drums to say you cannot support him and you cannot support the people who support his attitude toward our country.
On the issue of sort of healing and getting better as a country on this, in reading your article in The Atlantic, I feel like I get the diagnosis. You talk about Surgeon General Vivek Murthy having essentially diagnosed this problem of loneliness being a health problem in this country. You describe it as a real political problem as well. And I get, in a very fundamental way, this idea that, atomized, disconnected populations are really primed for extremism. That's part of what makes us vulnerable to the call of strongman leadership and authoritarianism, makes us susceptible to it like any other number of mature democracies around the world. What I don't get is the prescription for how to fix that, and whether that is a prescription that should come from people who want to be political leaders, or whether that's something we need to cure as a culture in some other way. I mean, what's the way out of it?
Well, I think it's cultural, political, and probably economic as well. I think we have to do a much better job of finding ways for people to work together again, work together on community projects, work together through existing organizations, whether it be, civic or religious. I mean, look at the outpouring of help for the people in Maui right now. I mean, that kind of volunteer effort that is so American, so much at the core of who we are when we are at our best. But I also think that we have to do a better job of trying to stand up against the divisiveness and against the constant stream of lies and falsehoods that come out of not just politicians, but also social media and other sources of information. So there's enough work for all of us to do. It's not just political leaders. It's really everybody saying, this country is too precious, too valuable, too important to allow it to continue to be fragmented the way it has been. And rebuilding that sense of trust and community is no easy task. I don't think anybody would argue with how difficult it would be. But there are ways of doing it. And let me just say, I don't think Joe Biden gets credit enough for trying to model responsible leadership. Just kind of getting up every day, doing the job. The legislative accomplishments that came out of his first, year and a half were amazing. We're rebuilding our infrastructure. We're once again investing in clean energy, advanced manufacturing, and so much more. We're trying to, from a legislative perspective, under his leadership, to put back into place some of the things that give people a sense perhaps of security and confidence, optimism about the future. And, what more can a leader do? I mean, really, when you come down and think about it, we've got Democratic governors now who are making school lunch free. That's a big deal.
Okay, so are you done, boo-boo? No, not quite yet? Okay, we're getting this going again. Sorry about that. All right, here we go. Oh,
in a difficult time, and particularly try to give kids more stability to be able to have better choices instead of just ripping away every social support. So this has to happen at all levels of politics, government, but more broadly, society as well.
Joe Biden is overseeing an economy that's had the lowest peacetime.
What's going on? What's going on here? Why are we freezing? Make sure I don't roll over his tail. Keep the little paws safe. All right, so I'm not really, to be honest, I'm not entirely here to listen to Hillary. We're really here to a lot of this will be on YouTube tomorrow. I'm really waiting to hear what's in those indictments. So, awaiting unsealing of the indictment. Yeah, let's do some reading, says Melly. Yes, I'm agreeing with you right there. even if I'm covered in cat hair now and my hair is really just come apart. All right. We don't have names yet. Some Azalea says, I want to hear what's in the indictments. Oh, what you think? You think we're not going to cover that? I'm not going to switch back for that. Do you know how many years I've been waiting for this? Yes, Kristen. RICO laws. Yeah. Oh, this is very exciting. Renia says Graham and Giuliani are scared at the moment. Well, we don't know who. We don't know who's involved exactly. So, I mean, I guess we're gonna find out. Wheezy Squeezebuff says it could take hours, but it's already been a little bit of. It's already been. I've been on for an hour. So, and well, Fire Queen says I've got all night. I understand, but I'm not. Bless Johnny over on Tara's Apprentice. He's a Gemini, and he'll just stay on for 8 hours just talking, and I don't know how. I don't know how. I have Saturn on my ascendant. It's hard for me to do stuff like that. Oh, good. Kevin's got a better image. Good. I am getting an end of the way things used to be, things coming to light and possibly feeling beaten up by Lindsey Graham with some evidence here. I'm this close to us actually hearing what's going to happen. I don't know. It just doesn't seem worth reading on since we're minutes away from the official things being announced. But in general, Lindsey is got some pain in front of him. I think is what we've what we kind of already know. Susie Buckingham says, what do you think about Hillary? How's she doing? She's fine. I don't know that there's a lot there. And just double checking. Will they cuff him? Tuxedo Cat is asking. Elena August is 88 charges for 45. I thought there were only 10 indictments, so there are 10 charges with any number of co-defendants. We'll see. So, David Garcia says we still have another supermoon this month. Right, exactly. So, wow. Thank you, Kathy Lamson. Thank you. There's some others I just want to say quickly. Thank you, Vicky K. And the kitty. And I think there was someone else back here. I don't quite remember. Oh, I'm getting a message. 88 across all indictments, across all cases. Ooh, really? Ooh. This could get interesting. Thank you, Marie. Thank you. 88. Hi. 88 charges across all 88 across all indictments across all cases. Oh, it's Sarah's typing. Oh, okay. That's what he's up to with Jack and everything. Oh, I see. Okay. Lucky Girl is saying 3 indictments, 78 charges before today. After today, it'll be 4 indictments and supposedly 88 charges. So another 10. Oh, okay. All right. I love it. Yes, 88. Perfect. And I have a kitty. Hello, kitty. How are you, precious? You're tired now. This is prime cuddling time we're cutting into here. But, oh my gosh. Yes, E. And not jailed yet. What's with that? So, wow. This makes me really happy. We've waited so many years. I'm here 365 days of the year, and I have been for years. And even before then, I was publishing four times a week. I mean, it was a lot for a long time. And through all of the horrible things this man has done, and to see a grand jury finally, to see these grand juries, plural, finally saying, no, you're done. We're not doing this, is amazing. Amazing. And Lois McDonald says, Boo Boo Send Kitty is like, enough already, just do it. Yeah. Tammy Aldrich says, Trump, if you're listening, you're toast. Oh, he's a briquette. He's so toasted. Yeah. Very exciting. It's very exciting, sweetie. All right. So David Garcia, yes, 8 years of hearing this garbage. How you doing? How are you, precious one? Oh, did you find a hair? Oh, he found a hair tie. Oh, it's very exciting. It's one of his favorite toys. Oh, problems? Problems? What'd you see? What'd you hear? Thank you, Emma Sue. Precious one. All right, well, we're coming up on the top of the hour. And so, Joy, he's a sweetie. We're coming up on the top of the hour, so there's probably a reset about to be going on here. So let me go back, and since we're awaiting new details, let's just check in for a minute.
This notion that undergirding this moment in American politics is a division of one America versus another. And you see that through line in everything from sports to trials to, the way we frame our economic outlook, that we are two countries. And it feels like an existential battle for primacy, ultimately. Nicole, I know you were taking notes when Secretary Clinton was speaking, but that comment she made about the Women's World Cup team and how it's not just a soccer game. It's really about what kind of America deserves to win and what kind of America we want to be a part of. And what you heard in Trump's criticisms of the American team was really a rebuke of an America where women are empowered, they're paid equitably, their voices are present, if not dominant, and ultimately his vision of America is a rebuttal to that kind of future. And that's why it actually matters when he says things like that, because it is so, it's truly an existential cry for where we're headed as a country.
I think what she did, and I think what Rachel did so artfully, is articulate how the right ties it all together, right? I think to us, it's like, and at the end of our show about all these things happening in politics, we'll get to what happened in the World Cup. To the right, it's all the same. And it is, she used the word, the right to rule. It is the entitled war against everybody else. And interestingly and ominously, everyone else is who the Department of Homeland Security warned is a possible target for domestic violent extremism and those inclined to violence in that category, which Christopher Wray, Trump's handpicked FBI director, says is the biggest threat to the homeland. So I think what the two of them put on the table, and I think we should all spend more time talking about it, is that these are not separate battles on the right. On the right, it's music artists who use their platform to stand up for LGBTQ rights. It's athletes who stand up for equal pay for men and women. It's journalists of all stripes who think that there is a right to a free press. It's prosecutors who think that the rule of law means something. On the right, it's all one war against all of them. And I think this idea, I spend all my time, not when I'm not reading about the different mandatory minimums in state and federal law, reading about connection and community as a bulwark against this rampant spread of political extremism and its tie to violence in this country. And maybe what she's putting on the table for us to mull and do something with is that community and connection is going to become necessary to our national security.
Well, and the way she ended it with Rachel was that final thought of, well, we have to win. That's certainly true. I think most politicians speak in that way. But the intersection and the unhealthy rot that has been brought into our system explicitly by this MAGA movement is, of course, not accepting the win. And so Donald Trump's first impeachment was about trying to cheat to do what he ultimately failed to do, which was to beat Joe Biden fair and square. He was abusing, according to all the evidence witnesses we heard, he was abusing his power and his power as commander-in-chief and his power over foreign policy to try to cheat because he was worried he would lose to Joe Biden. He was right about one thing. He had reason to worry that he would lose in a free and fair election to Joe Biden. He did. He lost by many states.
And it predates the Democratic primary.
Yes.
I mean, he's so freaked out by Joe Biden
Yes.
that well ahead of the primary, he's trying to take him out.
Yeah, so that's impeachment number one. We know impeachment number two was a very fast reaction to this horrific insurrection. Mitch McConnell and other Republicans, in that brief moment of their clarity, went down to the floor and said this was an insurrection, this was a crime. Mitch McConnell said the justice system can hold him to account. And here we are tonight with a grand jury returning every requested indictment in Georgia. And in our journalistic caution, we don't have the names yet. We'll report them when we get them. But the grand jury has returned every requested indictment in a Trump election probe to steal one of the states. He would have had to steal more than one to even get close, but to steal it. And so that's what struck me, Rachel, about you covered so many things just then. But at the end, yes, in a democracy, winning is how you take control of the government. But in an unhealthy democracy, in which we clearly have been tested in, it's not enough to actually win. You need a justice system to enforce it.
And the tell for me was always that Hillary Clinton did lose the election to Donald Trump, and people don't contest that, right? Even if you think that maybe, Donald Trump got some illegal help from Russia or whatever, still, everybody recognizes that Clinton lost to Trump. Even when Trump won that election, he said the election was stolen.
Correct. And he
said it was
named a commission to investigate the popular vote.
Because it was not a fair election. He said in advance that it wouldn't be. He said in advance of the 2016 election that he would not commit to accepting the results. When he won, he still did not accept the results. And what does that mean? It doesn't mean he's afraid he can't win. It means he wants our government to no longer be decided by elections. He wants our government and who's in power to be decided by who he says is in power based on what he believes ought to be the appropriate result. And the only result that matters is one that he chooses.
And the accomplices are what endanger the democracy, right? Mitch McConnell letting him cry it out after he lost in 2020. Oh, he'll come around. He never comes around. He plans January 6th. The Texas, if Trump won Texas by a lot, Texas didn't need to pass a voter integrity law, but they did.
Right.
I mean,
Okay, as they're just talking, Aspatia Rising is asking, does Fani have to be there to read out the charges in the indictments? No. People are expecting her to give some kind of press conference, but that may be in the morning. So, yeah, I read on that today, actually, Devin. Trump does want a dictatorship, but he's not going to get one. And actually, if he will not get back in, but if he did, he would not have he would be wildly unpopular. I mean, even Republicans would be really sick of him and his cruelty and his incompetence. So, please, Karen Hardinge. I'm going to go with Hardinge. Karen Hardinge says, please cuff him. Please have him come into the court in leg irons. He needs to know there is one justice system. Yes. Sandy Miller says, Fani's going to sleep so well tonight. Yes. Chen Lintero says, all right, everybody sing along. I'm dreaming of a white Christmas. Oh, I can't do that. I should have started lower. I'm dreaming of a white Christmas with all indictments snowing down. Exactly. Lowell H says 29 feet deep of snow, paper snow, that is. Exactly. Now, I don't know when, is anybody seeing anything trending or any rumors out there on how it's going? Bless you. Has anybody heard anything? I'm just wondering. Oh, just a kitty. He's a tired kitty now. Yes, he is. All right, so the grand jury returns 10 indictments awaiting details. All right, let me turn this back on.
Hasn't been out there in attacking the Republican election integrity laws. There are 48 states that have passed voter suppression laws based on the lie that she held up there and used as a cudgel against Donald Trump and her own party for many months very effectively. But she hasn't extended that to the voter suppression laws that have passed in 48 states.
Right now, it is just after 10 p.m. on the East Coast, and all eyes remain on Fulton County, Georgia. Any minute now, we could see the actual indictments that we know have been handed up tonight by a grand jury in the election interference investigation there into Donald Trump and his allies. We know that Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis asked the grand jury to vote on 10 indictments. We know the grand jury approved all 10 of those indictments. We have no idea what's in those 10 indictments. We do not know who was indicted, how many people were indicted, on what charges, or how many counts. About 1 hour ago, we saw those 10 indictments delivered to the presiding judge, Fulton County Judge Robert McBurney. He's for what it's worth, he's a Republican appointee to the bench in Georgia, appointed in 2012 by Republican Governor Nathan Deal. Judge McBurney appeared at his desk to scan through the indictments and then sign off on them. We all saw that live on camera because this is state court and you can have a camera there. The documents were then handed from the judge back to the Fulton County Clerk's office. And we hear from the clerk's office that they are now processing those indictments. That's important because that's the process that needs to happen tonight before those indictments are released to us and therefore to you. We're told that the processing could take anywhere from 1 to 3 hours, but it was about an hour ago that the clerk's office got those documents. Once the indictments are processed, we expect that we and all of us will be able to see them. We also expect District Attorney Fani Willis to hold a press conference at some point after that, whether that will be tonight as this evening turns into this late evening, whether that will be tomorrow, we don't know, but you'll learn as soon as we know. Joining us now is former FBI General Counsel and lead prosecutor under Robert Mueller, Andrew Weissman. Andrew, what have you seen tonight that we might not have noticed yet?
Well, I hate to complicate things, but it also could be the case that although there were 10 indictments handed up, which seems pretty clear from the cover page we saw, I'm not sure it's necessarily the case that all 10 are related to the Trump investigation. So again, I'm not saying that I know one way or the other, but it's just worth noting that could be the case. It, of course, is the case, as you've been talking about, that just because it's 10 indictments or even just one Trump indictment doesn't mean that it's one defendant. You could have myriad defendants in any case. We've obviously seen 3 in Florida and 1 in D.C., but there could be many here, as the sort of reports indicate. I did want to make a point that pick up on something Nicole said about sort of the fact that this is sort of Trump's worst nightmare, not just because he's facing criminal charges, which for any of us, would be anathema. It's that this is a place where the courts have really held up so far. One of the things that Trump could take away from something he did wrong was actually going to court to try and challenge the election, because some of the best evidence in the January 6th case will be that he lost over and over and over again, and all the courts said no. And so here he now has 4, it seems like at least 4 criminal cases, and his strategy is to never have a sort of trial where the public gets to see the evidence, where there's a place where facts and law matter. And he's avoiding essentially the sort of fault he made in going to court, because he operates in this world of all spin, all what I tell you is the truth. And this is a place where so far the jury system and the judges have, by and large, acquitted themselves very well, but it's one of the last bulwarks that we're seeing in place against sort of the movement that Trump is spearheading.
Andrew, as people who work in this business, we're all very much in favor to there being cameras and reporters and as much public access as possible to all public proceedings. Ari was waxing eloquent early on about what's great about being able to have a camera there to be able to watch the judge at work and processing those indictments, his role in that. As somebody who's been a prosecutor, very experienced prosecutor in the federal system where there aren't cameras, what should we know about both the upsides and also the downsides of having televised proceedings, how that might change or affect the way the proceedings happen, and whether it introduces any new risks for the country?
Well, there's no question that it's not an unmitigated plus. This is, nothing's black and white. When you are concerned about witnesses, and God knows there's enormous reason here to be concerned about witnesses. We hear the former president day in and day out attacking them. And it only takes one errant person, one rogue actor, and unfortunately we have seen that happen. So that is the real downside. Now, of course, that can happen without them being televised. That can happen with just their name being released. But to Ari's point, I mean, there obviously is just a huge benefit if you need to sort of try and figure out how to heal this country. If you think about what the January 6th committee did, that is something that a public trial can accomplish. In a way that just reading something, I mean, to me, I always think of this as sort of the Mueller report versus the January 6th committee. People taking their information in different ways. I'm an old nerdy guy. I can read the 400 pages, but that's not how everybody takes in their evidence. But again, I guess I want to complicate something, which is, although it's true that Georgia has this history where it wouldn't be unusual to have a public trial, one of the things that we are surely going to see if Donald Trump is indicted in Georgia is that he's going to seek to remove the case to federal court. He tried to do that in Manhattan. That failed. The federal judge there said no. It will be a very similar legal argument, but the facts are different. And so one of the things that could happen is if the case is removed to federal court, you will have the same prosecutors. They will go with the case, but the procedure that the federal court follows will now be the closed courtroom.
Yeah.
So we really can't bank on the fact that we know that the Georgia case will be heard publicly, because that will be a real knockdown, drag out fight over the venue, because it will change not just cameras in the courtroom, it will change the judge on the case, it can change the jury pool, it can have a wide effect on a lot of procedural issues in the case.
Andrew, one of the other complications of televising is the issue of sequestering. Jury may very well be sequestered in these cases or in all of these cases, and televising increases the likelihood that they would bump into coverage of the trial on television when they're back at their hotel rooms. The other that interests me more, which strikes me as a more challenging complication in many ways, is the sequestering of witnesses, which is very common in trials, and something that Jack Smith, for example, might want. He might want to sequester all the witnesses so no witness can be in the courtroom listening to the previous testimony of other witnesses. Televising would seriously, it seems to me, complicate the possibility of, or the effect anyway, of sequestering witnesses, and including in this Georgia case.
Well, I think that's true. Again, that goes into a balancing. And if you think that our democracy right now is at such a crossroads, the pluses of having a public trial do outweigh, I think, those issues. I do think for jurors, it's going to be, whether it's televised or not, it is going to be extremely important that the judge has firm control over the jury and what kind of evidence they see from outside of the courtroom. I think the issue of sequestering witnesses is one where that particular rule always seemed a little bit odd to me, because the rule was basically don't be in the courtroom, but there was no rule that you couldn't be told what happened in the courtroom, or you couldn't read what happened in the courtroom. And obviously, if you do that and you're a witness, you can be cross-examined on it to say, well, weren't you exposed to what happened? So my view is on that particular issue, the remedy is you can be cross-examined on what you saw and what you heard and whether it affected you. So I would put that in the balance. That would be sort of a lesser issue. I still think and doesn't take legal expertise. I just think the idea of having a public forum for all of this, when you have so many people with so much distrust of the information they're getting and the validity of it, being able to see it and hear it the same way I think the January 6th committee really.
Okay, like I said, I've got to kind of break in every once in a while so we don't get kicked out. Yeah, lucky girl. Yeah. So I can. All right. Hello again. We're just waiting. And as soon as we hear awaiting details. Oh, do we have breaking news?
Release of these indictments. You've been following this case since the investigation began. What's your perception of the latest right now and your immediate expectations for this evening?
Well, you know, Rachel, I think that I'm most struck by the fact that this timeline was sped up. There were 2 witnesses that we know of that were set to testify tomorrow. So the fact that they were called seemingly in the middle of the day, out of the blue, to say, hey, you know that we told you to come on Tuesday, come on down here actually right now and testify. It's striking to me, and it kind of tells me that the DA, for whatever reason, wanted to get all of this done in a single day. You know, the guidance that we'd received all along, and really kind of what I thought when you talk about a case that has an investigation that's been going for more than 2 years, is that it would take multiple days, at least 2 days, to present this sort of case before a grand jury. And that's apparently what was initially planned. So this kind of crunched timeline to get it all done in one day is certainly interesting to me. Of course, we want to see what is in those indictments. And, you know, we don't know what that looks like. We just know what the grand jury returned, but we don't know if it's one long indictment with multiple defendants as pertains to the case against Trump and his allies. We just don't know exactly what that looks like. I do think that it's interesting that, you know, you heard from George Cheedy. He was kind of tweeting. He was the journalist who was subpoenaed in all of this. And he said that he never actually had to go in there and testify. So that certainly signals that the DA, her team, essentially thought that they had all they needed in order to go ahead and put it to a vote and get a true bill in return, Rachel.
And Blaine, in terms of how this evening is likely to go, obviously it's the clerk's office that now has these indictments, and we expect that that's from whence we will receive them. That's where the office that will release these indictments to the public. We've also been told to expect that Fani Willis will make remarks, that she will speak to the press and therefore to the public about these indictments. Do we expect for sure that that will be this evening, even if it is quite late when the clerk's office has finished processing these documents?
I think that's quite possible, Rachel. I will say that I'm watching 2 places to find out what's in those indictments. 1, yes, the clerk's office, but 2, any sort of release from the DA's office. Even if it doesn't come with her speaking, if they put out some sort of a press release or some sort of a notice, those 2 places will be the source of where we will find out what happens. You know, Georgia law, of course, is very different from what we've seen in the previous legal challenges that Trump is facing, because the indictment has to be unsealed immediately. As soon as it was handed up by the grand jury, you saw kind of rather dramatically how it was walked into the judge's courtroom. He looked at it. That officially signified him unsealing it. So now that it's out there, what's happening right now is that indictment is being processed. So we are waiting to see, you know, madly kind of refreshing the court website to see if it's popped up there. We have people standing outside of the clerk's office to see if we can get any further guidance there. And of course, we're watching to hear from the DA's team to see if they will give us any further guidance. But again, right now, what's happening is it's processing as we wait to find out what's in those indictments, Rachel.
NBC's Blaine Alexander at the courthouse in Atlanta. Blaine, we've been following your every reported syllable all day long. Thank you so much for being with us. I know we'll be back with you as this night continues to unfold. As we follow this developing story out of Georgia, again, the status right now is that The Fulton County Courthouse did not close at 5, as it usually does today. It is still a hive of activity. At around 9 o'clock this evening, we saw 10 indictments brought from the grand jury proceedings to Judge Robert McBurney. He briefly and basically silently flipped through them, seems to have signed off on them. He then handed them back to the clerk's office.
Yes, and the clerk is processing. So that's what we're waiting on. There's a question here, back here. Will Fani speak tonight? We're kind of waiting to find out. It looked possibly, but we're not certain. Someone was Julie M was asking, is Sarah knitting as we watch justice unfold? Probably. Cheryl Clark says lights on. I don't know what you mean. Sorry. Valley Sergeant says, I wish I could hear Beyonce singing. Girls, they run the world. Yes. Devin says, what are Melania or Ivanka thinking? Well, Melania, she has checked out. She's done. Done. But Ivanka, let's have a look at Ivanka. I mean, but if Ivanka couldn't be bothered to even care about her own mother's grave. Really? Chris Hayes. Hello, Chris Hayes. Oh, Lila Integral Souls is knitting. Excellent. Sorry. And Valerie Sargent, you're crocheting. Excellent. Oh, Sarah says, I'm crocheting while updating the court site. She keeps saying refresh on the court site. So, all right, let's see what Chris has to say. I'm going to see what I've got here.
The election, except for the sort of last gambit at Mike Pence, is the fact that we have this incredibly distributed election system, right? Each county has election boards and election workers, and the counties report up to the states, and then the states report in. And all of that can make for chaos. It could also make for real problems in terms of standardizing people's access to the franchise. But it proved to be a kind of resilient system in 2020.
Oh, okay.
And it's precisely that sort of
Julian
degree of
Terra saying
federalism
there
that
will
comes
be a news
back around
conference
to the
tonight.
case that we think is now being processed and about to be handed down in Georgia, which is that a local prosecutor, again, empowered by local voters, is pursuing Georgia law.
Okay, so we're waiting. I don't know if I can stay on for that long, but I'm going to try. There was a question as we're waiting for what does Ivanka think? I think she's not hanging on this. She's just elsewhere. La la la. Doing something else, playing with their kids, taking a bath, whatever she's doing. And temperance, full in temperance. Plus, she's a bully herself, so yeah, it's just she's kind of done with a lot of this. But that's Ivanka. I was even trying to read on why hasn't she done something about her mother's grave? Hello? Anybody? No, she is unbearably full of herself. Unbearably. So Cheryl Clark says Trump's gonna have another sleepless night. Well, let's read on Trump. Let's read on Trump. See what we got. Let's see here. Yes, Mary Smith. She and hubby have their own new concerns. Yes, isn't there a report coming out tomorrow about the millions upon millions that they brought in? That Trump brought in. Yeah. Alan says Ivanka is self-absorbed like her father. Yes. And Trump. Oh, his enemies are having a great time and conspiring with each other. I get a lot of the energy of kind of the man's fantasies because he spends a lot of time fantasizing about things in his head, and it's in my opinion remarkably violent. It's gross. But how you doing? How you doing, Trump? This was the plan all along to take me down. Okay, drama triangle king. He's a drama king. This is just another thing. I'm always the victim. The victim, I tell you, the victim. No president's ever been treated worse than Trump. Go away, JFK. I don't want to hear it, Lincoln. Yeah, that. This is just pathetic. Don't want to do the time. Don't do the crime. He is waiting. He might be watching TV. Yeah, he is watching TV. But this is the biggest bunk of conspiracy theory is what this feels like. Ugh. Yuck. So, all right. And okay, we're just waiting. RN Swan says, how are Trump's lawyers feeling tonight? Alka-Seltzer or Rolaids? Actually, to be honest, I think a lot of them, they're watching with like professional interest, but on the whole, I think a lot of them got their money up front. So they're like, I'm good. So, Yeah. Jared's 3.1 billion. What was that back here? Joe Eliza says, I've thought about that, about Ivana. I don't think she's really there, likely. And I can't remember what I'm reading on. Oh, because I'm not writing stuff down. So I've got cards pulled, but I don't know what they're for. Oh, Alina Haba. Oh, the lawyers. That's what I was reading on. Thank you. Thank you. Wondering if they're going to have a case. They're going to be able to make any kind of case. It's like, all right, we're being paid to do this. All right, we'll become MAGA supporters, Trump supporters. And then they're just weak and on the defensive because this stuff's on tape. There's corroborating witnesses. You have his own voice on tape. It's just Kelly Max wondering, will the Georgia jail provide Trump with Sharpies and paper? So is Trump you reading on? I did that. I read on Trump. He's it's drama king. It's just a whole bunch of Sturm und Drang signifying nothing. Yeah. Tish Ellis, Stephen Miller speaking on Faux News. Oh gosh, he said radical left just keeps pushing. Per Autumn, sit down. Yeah. Cecilia C says, have they sent the grand jurors home yet? I believe so, because they voted, they turned in the indictments. Black Boot says on Midas Touch, Ben has been talking nonstop since 9 p.m. Eastern, so 8 p.m. So an hour and a half. Yeah, it's what I've been doing. Well, talking nonstop. I haven't been doing that. I've been dancing. I've been dancing in my chair. How's Fani doing? Let's have a look. Who asked that? Who asked? Free speech. And then Cheryl Clark wants to know about Giuliani. Oh, I can look, but gross. Fonnie Willis. And she's got Trump's number. The energy's very smooth. It's very calm. She's got this. When she said, we're ready, she meant it. She's after Trump the man. Doesn't matter what kind of chaos he tries to create in the background. She has made a legal decision. She has a grand jury where all the evidence and everything is laid out just so. Going into it with a very steady, these people have, it's not just him, that's the thing. There are others too, but they are going to get a fair trial. I will make sure of it. And with evidence, I will convict those who have done wrong, that I can prove it. So, yeah. Juniper's Tarot and Magic said, can we peek at his chart tonight? I'd like to see what's sitting on Trump's DC line, especially with Uranus being square right now for all of us. Yes, the sun today, the sun was square Uranus. So this is not a day. This is not a good day for anybody to be willing to put up with Trump's foolishness. We're all just like, enough with the thinking outside the box, maverick. No, we're tired. We're tired. Right here. Electra Trump says, Autumn, your hair set up nicely for such a long day. Thank you. Thank you. A free speech says a Leo new moon this week, this Wednesday. Yes, absolutely. Let's see. All right, let's listen to Lawrence is the best because Lawrence never fell for any of it. Even when the other anchors were kind of pressing him a little bit to be like, he's acting presidential now, right? And Lawrence was like, no. It's like, okay. All right, let me. Yes, Azalea. MAGA tears. Delicious. Oh, and by the way, I am drinking a ginger ale this evening. I just want to mention this. I'm drinking a ginger ale this evening in solidarity with those poor women who had their ginger mints. The mother-daughter the election workers who were treated so horribly. And it was like, oh, that was drugs, that was cocaine. No, they were ginger mints. So, yeah. Aaron Swan says, I understand it's almost ready to happen. According to whom? Because boy, would I love to hear that. It's not under there. You took the hair tie away, dear. Okay. Tuxedo cat. Sorry. Okay. No, there's nothing under there. Okay. Sorry. Troubles.
Yeah. But on this front in particular, I don't know, particularly because Trump has been so forthright in criticizing Brian Kemp.
And Fonnie Willis opposed this law really energetically. She was in there testifying against it, saying that it was an outrage. Georgia had gotten through a couple of centuries of government without it. Why do we suddenly need this?
And four Democratic district attorneys have sued to try to block this law from going into effect. But there's
I think you're right. I mean, I'm going to stand with you in pulling the fire alarm. And I think it's been nationalized. I mean, DeSantis is carrying this out in Florida. DeSantis' plan to get rid of the FBI is the national version of this. Your conversation with Secretary Clinton is about where you two were talking about the weaponization of law enforcement. I mean, this is something they have wanted to do, and they've never had the sort of reckless disregard for public opinion because they've never operationalized the information ecosystem so completely.
Mm-hmm.
There would be no political consequences for them flipping on their previously held belief that maybe we'll
we'll see,
they can't do hard things. Republicans can't and won't do hard things. They testified before Fonnie Willis because they were subpoenaed. I mean, John Bolton wanted to testify in one of the, 2 impeachments, but he wanted to be subpoenaed. They all want to do, none of them want to do the right right thing if it's hard. They will do it if they're subpoenaed and they have to, and they can hide behind that. But none of them will fight to protect Fani Willis. If this boulder starts rolling down, I mean, have you seen the Republicans lately? If the boulder starts rolling down the hill, if the law goes into effect and they can get rid of her, none of the Republicans are going to defend her or protect her job or protect her case.
And I think Rachel's right to also look at the precedent, which has been an open war on everything from law and order to crime and punishment to Blue Lives Matter at the insurrection. All these things give way when there is the right Trumpy partisan energy. And so there's a record of that complete contradiction. I agree with Lawrence's query, if you will, that how the replacement...
I'm checking Twitter for the answer.
Always a good idea.
I have a better person to check with, actually. Neil Katyal, former solicitor, acting solicitor general of the United States, has looked into this a little bit. I believe, Neil, thanks very much for being here. We're talking about a matter of a law in Georgia that's never been used before, but we're expecting the worst from it. Have Republicans in Georgia given themselves the ability to essentially shoot a lightning bolt out of their finger and smote this investigation once it starts going in a direction they don't like?
So, Rachel, I think you're absolutely right to draw attention to this bill. And I think it's something we should very much worry about as it's now been passed into law. But I do think there's three kind of countervailing things to think about as we evaluate whether this could do anything. First is it's true it can come into effect very soon, but it's not the governor alone. As I understand it, it requires an 8-member commission to review the actions of a district attorney and find them egregious in order to remove someone. So that it's set up as something called the Prosecuting Attorneys Statewide Qualifications Commission. So it's different than just one governor signing off. It's more than that. I'm not sure we even know who's on that commission. So that's
they haven't even fully fleshed out the commission. Governor Kemp hasn't even made his appointees to the commission. I just, given the reason this commission is coming into existence, I don't have a lot of faith in what it's designed for.
Yeah, and that brings me to the second point. You know, obviously DeSantis has done this in Florida as recently as last week. I do think it's a different matter to do this here in a prosecution like